everyone. Today I am joined by Julie Jones, our branch leader in our Eastlake office, which also happens to be my office. And I absolutely love Julie. She's one of my most favorite people. She's also my boss as well. But I was excited to get to talk with Julie today because I respect her for so many reasons. She's been in this business as a mortgage banker for 20 plus years, counseled thousands of clients. And I just always feel like I have some of the best conversations around money and financing and lending when I talk with Julie. So she's going to share some awesome nuggets with us today.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being on my show.
You got it. Anything.
So I would love to dive in and have you just tell us a little bit about you, your background, what got you into finance and lending. And then also, I'd love to hear from you kind of like, what is your money mindset and how has it changed over time?
Yeah, it's a great question, actually, because I got into being a lender via a pathway that most people don't know. So my mom was a public school teacher. My dad was an agent. My grandfather was an agent. And at some point, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a teacher. But then by the time I was in college, I realized, oh my gosh, there's people who don't have a home. And yet I'd grown up going in and out of homes, right, with a dad who was an agent. And so I thought, I'm going to make that difference. I'm going to make sure that people who have barriers to home ownership, right, if I have any say over it, I'm going to help, right? I started a Habitat for Humanity chapter in college, and I then went on to get my master's degree in social work in housing and economic development. And so I worked for a local nonprofit here in Seattle, Homesite, and we used to help home buyers get ready to go to the bank. So we talked to them about their down payment assistance. We talked to them about qualifying. And it was so rewarding to really then be able to shepherd them to the bank, right, and be able to then buy, often with layered down payment assistance. And, you know, at some point I realized I was working a lot of hours. I was having difficulty paying my student loans. And, you know, there were some things about the nonprofit world that I didn't love. So I thought, you know, I'm going to be a lender temporarily before I figure out what I'm really going to do. You know, it was bad to be a lender really, right? Because I was going to save the world. You know, I was going to help with home ownership, not save the world. But I knew all kinds of lenders because we would get people ready to go. And so I talked to a few of them and chose to go work for a bank. And I realized at some point very early on that, look, people need good lenders. Yes, right? So if they're coming into a bank institution and they've got down payment assistance and they've got all these things and they're already feeling really vulnerable, that it was okay to stay being a lender, even as a social worker, because the difference made in some ways felt even greater.
No, I love that. I think that you bring a very unique background into this profession because many of us all come from finance, economics. It's always kind of been about money, but you have that unique social work background. So you have that compassion and you've seen that other side that I think is really important, that we have the opportunity to really touch people's lives in ways that other professions don't. We get to see on an individual basis people realize dreams and we help them build that generational wealth that can really only be built through owning a home and real estate. I mean, yes, you can invest, but statistically, it's all out there. If you rent versus owning a home, it's like 10 times the amount of wealth that you gain.
And it's so funny that you mentioned that, because when I first became a lender, or when I first was interested in helping people become homeowners, it really wasn't necessarily a wealth-based conversation. It was a stability-based conversation. So I worked in homelessness prevention, right, in all of King County. And the number one goal was to make sure we kept people housed, because statistically, once someone loses their housing, it's very difficult oftentimes to get back to being stable. So all I wanted to do was help give people stability in their lives, a place to call home, right? And it evolved very quickly into, holy cow, those people that I helped buy their first home are now selling it 5 years later, and they're making a couple $100,000. And they were, you know, low and modest income people who couldn't buy without the assistance. And now look, it forever changed my mindset on not only is a house a home, right? Whether it's a condo or a townhome, like the home that you come home to, it also is forever wealth changing.
Yeah.
And it has transformed my relationship to money, actually.
Yeah. And that kind of leads me into my next question. What
Great.
would you say your money mindset is? And how do you feel like it's changed over time, through your experiences?
Well, I would say growing up, right, with a teacher and an agent who had ebbs and flows in his income, right, I really lived a life of money was finite. Right? We were going to, and of course I still understand that it is, but really you had to make enough money to pay your bills. There wasn't a lot of conversation about saving or investing or growth. There really just was, you make enough of a living to pay your bills, right? And then becoming a lender, seeing some of my clients ahead of me. I helped clients become homeowners before I became one. And once I saw that wealth transforming for them, I really got clear. Oh, this is interesting. I've put a ceiling on my own thoughts about money, and it has forever changed how I feel about it. Now I really feel like, go for it, right? Work hard, be smart. You can't just have no plan, right? You can, but you can earn a lot of money and lose it all, right? Work hard, be smart, and wealth can really happen and grow.
What was your own personal experience about buying a house? Like, when did you buy your first home?
Yeah.
And tell me about that. I would love to hear about that.
I bought my first house with minimum down with an FHA loan, like 3.5% down. I had to borrow money from my parents. Sorry, I got a gift from my parents. Actually, it truly was a gift, to be fair. I was down to about $200 in my bank account, but I got that house. I paid $220,000 for that house. And my father had always said to me, as someone who sold a lot of his houses, he had always said to me, your first house should be your last house. It's your first retirement plan. And so I still own that home today, and it's worth about $1.3 million. There's just no way. There's no way I would have amassed that wealth, right, in other avenues. So it's my proudest achievement. My husband calls my first house my baby. He's not wrong. He's not wrong. It's so special to me.
Yeah. Well, it's life-changing. It's one of those moments, like there's those defining moments in life. And I think there's a few of them, but one of the biggest ones is buying your very first house. And I love that statement, your first house should be your last house, because it really does make a lot of sense. When you buy that first home, you go ahead and you live in it, you achieve the appreciation, you learn how to be a homeowner, and then you move up to that next home you're going to own, and then you keep that one as a rental. And then that provides that passive income stream that builds on itself that really not a lot of other investments can do for you. It's a three-pronged investment versus just kind of you invest money in the markets and so forth. So I love that. What do you think, so over the last 20 years, the landscape has changed a lot for home buyers. Like there's so many things, like just economically, financially, like if you think about it, we went through the Great Recession in 2008, which is really like a once in a century type of a financial crash. That changed a lot of perspectives in that generation that was coming up. It also, just in the last really 5 years, there's been another major shift financially. These generations coming up that are going to be first-time homebuyers or are newly first-time homebuyers, how has it shifted their perspective on their financial opportunities as well as just being homebuyers?
Yeah. I don't know how it's shifted their perspective. I mean, certainly when we came out of the Great Recession, there were people who were like, don't ever have debt, don't ever have debt, don't ever have debt. I still have those clients today, right? They will never carry any credit card debt to the next month, right? It's very get small, right? More of that finite, right? Conversation. And that's, we know credit card debt is at an all-time high. However, I talk to a lot of clients who still are pretty great with their cards and pretty wise there. I would say in general, we've gone through evolutions and ebbs and flows of affordability whereby I can pay in rent something similar to what I could pay in a mortgage, right? Always higher in a mortgage, almost always here. Our housing's expensive. Look, Seattle is one of the hardest markets to get into because it's very expensive. But I always like to say what my grandfather used to say, rest his soul. He used to say, like, trying to buy a house is like trying to catch a moving train. The longer you wait, the harder it is to catch it. Because our market, no matter the rate, the truth is, the God's honest truth is, our market is appreciating. You have mountains and land and water all mixed in. If you want to buy here, we literally have more people coming in than going out. With the diverse economic industries, with just having people be first-time homebuyers as a rite of passage. We have more people coming in than coming out. So I think one of the things right now anyway that I'm seeing is that some people have a real adjustment to, but I could pay this on rent and oh my gosh, my mortgage is going to be this, right? And it's a valid consideration. Can you afford it? Only you can answer that, right? I talk to them about budgeting and all that sort of good stuff. But the one thing I would say, and the one thing I feel very strongly about is with rates higher, prices are tempered, right? You might get multiple bidding because there's way more buyers than there are sellers right now. That's just what's so. Again, it's the city of Seattle, right? Economically diverse, industries, etc. Gorgeous, by the way, don't tell anybody. But, right, the demand is strong. We're still in multiple bids and buyers, but when rates come down, it's going to be an explosion that I don't even know that we're ready for because there's so many buyers who are on the sideline saying, I'm going to wait until that payment feels better or that rate sounds better. Because, oh my gosh, we've been so spoiled with rates. Since September 11th, rates stayed at 5.5 and under until the last little bit of time. That's generations, right? You know, for people can't see behind the camera right now, but I can. And some of the people behind the camera right now have never known life, right? Where rates were anything but 5.5 and under, right? And even in the conversation. So right now rates are higher, but what does that do? It keeps the bidding less intense and less aggressive. So if I could pay $700,000 on a house today, and yes, might my rate be 7.25 or something like that? Yes, that's true. But when rates come down, there's actually studies about this. I can't comment on them, but there's studies where we know buyer tendencies. Once rates hit about 5.5 to 5.25, they start to de-thaw and be like, okay, let's go. Right? So the longitudinal studies, right, that have been tracked. When that happens, the 5 buyers on that home could be 10, 15, 20. And that, $700,000, $800,000 home that they were looking at is overnight going to be $900,000, $950,000. Look, it's not sexier to get a $900,000 home at a 5.5 interest rate with that loan. It is not mathematically sexier to get that than to have gotten the $700,000 price home with a rate of 7.25 with a loan you can do over and refinance at some point. I can't stand date the rate, marry the house. It kind of grosses me out for multiple reasons. But
I know it's overused.
But the idea is valid that I can't go back and renegotiate the price I paid because who would I be negotiating with? Myself.
Right.
Hey, Julie, you should have paid a lower price. You cannot do it, right? No. But you can at the lower asset price. You can go back and redo the vehicle that you got to get it. So I'm a huge fan of the market today, I have to say. And I think it's a really great buyer market as well as a seller market. So I'm kind of a rare bird in that regard.
I totally agree with you because we see what's going to happen. Like we have the ability from our experience to see what's going to happen ahead. I say to clients, this is going to sound really weird. Who cares what the rate is? Like it doesn't even matter. It's not even in the top 5. Lock in your price. Your price is what's going to matter. Get the asset on sale because for every, whatever, 0.5%, a 1% in drop, it's 5 million more people that become qualified to buy. So if those people enter the market, imagine how, and with no more additional inventory, there just isn't enough land. And yes, there are zoning bills that are out there, which could help down the road, but that is down the road. Even if like that bill passed today with no arguments, no appeals, the years it's going to take for feasibility, for putting the planning in, for the builders to come in and make the plans and getting the permits and get that from today up to a finished product to sell is years.
And you're losing appreciation all the while.
And you're losing
because here's something that buyers don't know right now. Buyers don't understand. Well, they do if they've been looking for a long time. If you started looking for a home a couple years ago and you started to feel rates kind of move up and you thought, oh, I think I'm just going to wait, which would have made sense at the time. You didn't know better, right? I might have even said as a lender, well, hold on, let's see what happens here, right? And then we've been holding on for a while, right?
Yes.
All the while rates have been increasing and kind of doing a little jog here right now anyway. If they look back at that house that they could have bought, and they look at it today, their payments higher, not just because that price that they would be paying, no matter the rate today, is a lot higher, and the rate is higher. So they really lost in both regards. They lost in the price of the asset itself, and then they are losing in the rate. We can't control the rate, but we can control when we get in, right? When we get into the market. So it's kind of similar to the stock market. We would say buy low, sell high, buy low, sell high, right? Buy low. Prices right now on homes are mitigated. They're still under pressure. You're still paying more in Seattle than you're paying in most cities in the country. But you're also seeing an incredible return on that investment over time in Seattle that we don't see in other cities in our country.
Well, and there's a thing called, in people's minds, there's perception, right? And perception is people's reality.
Yeah.
Rates have now normalized in the 7s.
Balanced.
People are used to it. So more people are jumping in now, which we knew was going to happen.
We did.
And so that's causing this uptick that we've seen this year with more competition, more people jumping in. I think and I know you and I've discussed this before, but one of the things I think that does not get nearly enough attention in this market, and consumers may not even be aware of, is as of last year, haven't looked at the statistic this year, but last year, it was as much as 30% of homes were being purchased by big corporations, private equity companies that are forever rentals. That's their business model. They buy up big neighborhoods. Like if they go to a builder and say, I'll buy that entire plat of homes, like it's 100, 200 homes, and they portfolio them into a REIT, real estate investment trust.
Right.
And they see the future of real estate is only going up, and that's why they're investing in it. It's a very strong and it's a very solid investment. And if you're an investor, one of the reasons why you'd buy a REIT is because you know that real estate is only going to go up over time. But here's the thing. For every house that is purchased by one of those corporations or one of those private equity companies, we lose the ability for an individual home buyer to buy that house. I had heard last year the projection by 2030 was that up to 60% of all homes.
I've heard similar, but that's high.
Would be owned by a corporation or private equity company for a REIT. Now, what's interesting is literally as of yesterday, I saw that there's a bill proposal out there. Now, it's just a proposal. It hasn't become law. I don't even think it's been debated yet. I'm going to follow it though, because there has been a proposal finally that's been put out there. And I don't know all the details of it, but essentially the idea is that there would be some limitation on how much
I heard rumor this was coming down the pike.
Could be purchased by, and I think if they can find a legal way to maneuver that, I'm not an attorney, so I have no idea what the legalities of that are.
I'm a lender, not an attorney.
But if they can find a legal way to limit that, I am 100% for that, because I think that will help provide more inventory for these individual home buyers, which we advocate for every single day. Because I'd rather see the individual home buyer get that asset and put that into their own portfolio. Because they can invest into a REIT, but they're not going to get that kind of a return, and they don't get the joy of being in that home like they would. So I was curious to get your take on what you've thought.
It's funny. So what keeps coming up for me as you're sharing this is who I am as a lender when I'm advocating for my clients, right? So I've pre-approved the clients. I work closely with the agents, right? And now they're presenting an offer. And I always, as a lender, I'm calling the listing agent, calling the seller's agent, and speaking to them. And one of the things that I often say, if they ever say to me, well, we've got a cash offer, we've got some cash offer, I say, well, I'm going to say something really bold right now, right? Or something like that. I say, I would really invite you to ask your sellers if they were able to buy the home that they're living in today with cash. And if they didn't, if they needed a loan to get this home, I ask and implore them to consider the offers with financing, because everybody's trying to get that shot. Everybody is trying to get into the housing market. And for my first-time homebuyers in particular, most of those sellers didn't buy those houses with cash, right? They needed a loan. It's not weird that someone needs a loan to buy a house. I mean, it's needed. It's necessary for a housing market to even move. So I just really, I'm a human being before I'm anything else, right? I'm a human being, then a mom, then a wife, then a lender, right? Kind of in that order, right? Or a boss, whatever. I never use that word, but, but I, really as a human being, I would just really say, don't take the cash offer as this magic thing. Yeah. It's just cash. Yeah. And by the way, most of the people with cash originally had loans at some point on their journey. Yes. So I just applaud it. I ask for the humanity at place. And I can't tell you how many times it really helps.
No,
because
it does.
We forget. We think, oh my gosh, cash is better. Is it? I don't know.
You actually, you gave me that idea a few years back. Yeah. And I bring this up with agents all the time. And I remember this one particular agent where I had this conversation with her, and after she ended up choosing her offer, and she called me afterwards, she goes, you know what? I have to tell you that I'm embarrassed to say that what you told me really hit me. Yeah. And it really had to make me sit down and think about what I was doing and why I was doing it. And she says, you're right. She says, and now I don't think I'll ever look at it in the same way. And I just thought to myself, if we can just get people thinking and get them to think about that, that will help some of these home buyers that seemingly don't have a great chance to get on to that homeownership ladder, to make that generational wealth difference in their family, that can make the difference of kids going to college for the first time, kids, them having a good retirement, that nest egg. So when you give advice to your home buyers, like you've got a home buyer that called you today and said, hey, Julie, I'm probably a year out, which we know a lot of times that means they're going to be next month or 6 months from now.
2 weeks from now, they found the perfect house. Yeah.
But they call with the intention of it, say being 6 months to a year. And they just say, what do I need to do to really get myself prepared so I'm in the best possible situation where I can become a home buyer? What's the advice that you give them?
A couple things. One is, I would say, as we kind of talked about earlier, right, there's the rent that we can pay that right now in today's Seattle market is sexier, there's that word I use all the time, than what your mortgage payment's going to be on the same house. Just is what it is, right? That's the market we're in. However, you're paying for the landlord's wealth building, the landlord's cash flow, or the landlord's dirt, or everything, right? And over here, of course, you're building your own wealth journey. There's a difference. If I'm paying, $2,500 in rent and my new mortgage payment's going to be $5,000, that's extreme, but it's easy math. It's double, right? And I can afford to do that. I'm very, very strong as a lender on, there's what the 2D guidelines say, right? Based on your income and your debt and your credit, this is what you can afford. That's the 2D answer. Only you can answer for yourself the 3D answer, which is, but I travel back and forth to Hong Kong to visit my family, or I have high cost childcare, or I'm caring for my parents. What you can do on paper is not what you should do, right? You got to figure that out for yourself. But one way to test it, so you're paying $2,500, potential is on paper, you can afford $5,000. The very first thing you should do is try and save the difference, right? It's called saving your payment shock in the industry, right? In the nonprofit world, that's what we talk about, right? But save the difference. Right? Don't go blind into that. If you really are, let's say you have 4 months left on your lease, it's too expensive to break your lease, or it's just not going to work. Great. Here's what you got to do. You got to save as if you're paying a $5,000 mortgage payment right now. Because it's so easy if you do that. taking on the $5,000 mortgage payment because you're used to it, right? It's
adjusted.
very peaceful to sign those loan documents and understand that you can do it because you already have. That's the first thing I would
like
say.
that. I like that. That's driving the payment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a big one because the difference between what people can rent for and what they are right now what their mortgage payment is.
Yeah.
It is at least a third higher to 50. It's typically 50% to almost double in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
So I love that strategy. What are you seeing like as far as credit goes? Are you seeing with as high as credit is, like we're at all-time highs, are you seeing a lot of clients coming in with
higher debt?
Adverse scores due to being maxed out?
I'm not, but can I teach your podcast audience something
Yes.
right now? Because someone listening, this is going to make a difference for.
Yeah.
Your credit score is barely impacted by inquiries. We're talking like a tiny little dip. An inquiry is someone's pulled your credit, right? So out there in the market today, there's all of these, commercials and radio marketing and print marketing. And I will protect the innocent here and I won't name any names, right? But it's ridiculous. And as a consumer, you end up thinking, oh my gosh, I can never have my credit pulled. This is terrible, terrible, terrible. Listen, it is 10% of your credit score. It is mathematically the tiniest factor of what impacts your credit score. You could go out and have your credit pulled quite a bit. Don't do it, but you could go out and have your credit pulled quite a bit. You're not going to dramatically shift that needle. But here's what does. So 35% of your credit score, by the way, we know this mathematically from the credit bureaus, 35% of your credit score is whether or not you've been late. For the consumer who doesn't know what that is, if you've gone to collections or in judgment, you're late. Right? It's official.
Yep.
Right? Other than that, oftentimes I'll have clients say, oh my gosh, I'm worried about my credit. I pay late regularly. Well, late on any sort of revolving debt or regular debt is if you're over 30 days late. You know what? If you haven't paid May and June is, you are officially reported as late. And that those dings are 35% of your credit score. That's huge. But the next biggest one is what I wanted to share about because people just don't know this. 30% of your credit score is what we call your revolving debt ratio. So credit cards are revolving debts, as of course you know, and you know this already, right? So if I have a $10,000 limit on my credit card and I owe $9,000, I owe 90% of the limit. I have a lower credit score. It's a 30% impact if even one card is off. So some people are like, oh, but all my credit cards, the limit is X and I owe Y. No, one card can trigger it, right? And really drop your score. As opposed to if I owe $900 on that $10,000 limit, my score is much better. Do you know when I became a lender, it was the opposite? It was the exact opposite. Do you remember this? It used to be if I owed more of the limit, then I didn't have a lot left to charge. So I was a safer customer.
Interesting.
Right? When credit reports were coming through by modem on a phone line, I just aged myself. But that's what right? If I owed most of what the limit was, then you could count on me. I couldn't go out and charge more. You kind of already saw under the hood. But that's not what we know. We now watch consumer behavior. And if we owe more of the limit, right? We have a tendency to go towards debt more regularly, right? Or that's what the data says anyway. So if I could teach consumers one thing, it's that revolving debt ratio. 30% of your credit score is what your balance is to your limit. And if you want to have power over your credit score, you have it more easily than you think because you don't just have to pay it down. That's option one. Option one is to pay it down. But what's the other one? Raise the limit. Right? I just met with clients last night. Right? And she's like, but I'm always traveling. I'm always using that card. I said, well, oh my gosh, then you have to raise the limit because you don't deserve a score that's so heavily hit by that. When you're charging, you're getting reimbursed by your company and off you go. So the rule of thumb, just for your consumers listening is, you don't ever really want to owe more than 40% of the limit, right? That's your solid credit score range. If all other things are created equal, right? And the best credit tier based on revolving debt ratio is you owe 25% or less of the limit. So consumers have more power over their credit scores than they realize just by that little nugget.
They do. Like, and to your point, like asking their credit card company to raise their limit or go get another credit card.
And split it.
And split it. So that's another great strategy. And if you're a good paying customer, the credit card company is not going to have a problem raising your limit because they want to keep you as a customer. They know there's a million credit companies out there that will gladly give you a new credit card, especially if you're a paying customer. The other one that I have found that a lot of consumers don't know is, here's another way you can trick the credit score.
Okay, I'm ready.
Is if you track what your monthly balance is on your credit card and you make sure, I say do this 3 to 4 days before the end of your billing cycle. Right. So if your billing cycle ends today on April the 30th, no later than April the 27th, go in there and make the payment on that credit card and make sure that the balance owing is ideally, like you said, less than 25% of whatever your high limit is, or pay it off if you're able to do that.
Sure.
Or like you said, a good solid is 40%.
Right.
Ideally it's 25, but do it 3 days before the end of that cycle. And the reason why that works is because what's reported to the credit bureaus for the next 30 days on the cycle is whatever that balance was on the end of your cycle. So if you pay it 3 days before, now what's going to get reported is what that lower balance is.
Absolutely.
So it's going to help your score. And it's nobody knows exactly how many points it gives, but it's definitely going to give a few points.
But it is 30% mathematically of your score, right? Yeah.
And everything helps. That's why on Rapid Rescores, when a client pays down a credit card, we can usually get a few extra points.
Well, it's that 30-day window that I teach clients, right? You're not late unless you're over 30 days late. If you use that 30-day window to your advantage, don't wait until the day the balance is due to pay it, right? Get ahead of that, even just a little bit, right? To manipulate that data coming in. You know, at some point, data might be instantaneous, although there could be backlash on that, right? Because I do think consumers get some sort of breathing room, right? If I charge today, shouldn't mean I have to pay today. That's not the value of a credit card, right? Although a lot of people use it for points, perks, and convenience, right? But really, it's magic just to teach clients that one thing. So to answer your question, I'm not seeing. The data says that credit card debt is an all-time high. I'm actually not seeing that, even with my first-time home buyers. I think a lot of the buyers still today are coming out of that Great Recession. Either they were old enough to watch their parents, right, or hear their parents or their grandparents talk about it, and there is some wisdom coming into play, right? Yeah. It gets trickier when we're looking at that higher mortgage payment. So the more you can save and prepare for that, and the more you can really watch your credit card spending, the better off you'll be.
It's interesting. Gen Z, who is it's the generation coming up. You have a Gen Zer.
Yes. Yes, I do.
They're going into college. They're in college. They're coming into the first time homers. They are on record as being the most fiscally conservative generation we've had in a few generations. And that's good. Like, they're very smart. They're very aware of where their money goes. They don't tend to waste it on things like prior generations did. I think it's going to be fun to watch this generation enter into the workforce, enter into the housing market. They tend to be like part of the shareable economy. They'll find ways of sharing with their friends, like cars.
Offer up, all of that stuff. Yeah, for sure.
They found really savvy, scrappy ways to really navigate the financial challenges that I think.
And I give them credit, right? I mean, you would hope that, I hope my kids are smarter than I have ever been.
Yes.
Right. That is my prayer. Please learn better, do better, know better. Right. Speaking of that, one of the things that I know you and I are so passionate about is our kids and fiscal and financial literacy starting at such a young age. So I would like you to share about your dad here in a minute. But one of the things that you and I have really bonded over is there were no conversations in middle school or high school about saving or about money. I mean, I think we had DECA, we had some business class. It was like literally how to write a check and how to open a bank account. That's actually not what I mean. I mean, if actually we taught our children at such a young age, and so we of course have started, but save $10 a week. If you save $10 a week and you're 12 years old, I mean, I think at about 6th or 7th grade is where it's a different conversation. You can teach them a cuter version of it when they're younger, and I know your dad did. But money grows over time.
Yes.
It just grows over
Yes.
time. And there's this infamous parable in our industry called the tale of two brothers, right? And one invests, let's say it's the tale of two sisters. It's us today, Carese.
Okay.
So one sister has, inherits, $10,000 and puts it all in to an account right now. Another says, oh no, I'm going to invest over time and keep some of it, right? Well, who's the wealthier sister?
The one that got into the market
Einstein.
earlier. Yes.
Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world.
Yes.
The money in
Yes.
sooner, the better you are.
Yes.
So we can trickle that down to a very simple conversation of even if you save $10 a week, right? Because I don't think there's any saving that's too small. I worked with really modest income buyers. I would never say to them, save even $100 a month back in the day. It was too difficult. But I would say even the mentality of it, save $5 a week, save 10. Because the sooner you do that, that little bit of drop, it's like,
Yes.
a snowball down a hill. It just keeps growing and growing and growing and growing. And it's really a blessing. So I would say, speaking of real estate and speaking of talking to my buyers, I don't ever, 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 ever want them to spend their last dollar on the house.
Yes.
And you feel the same way,
Yes.
right?
Totally. It's always time in the market, not timing the market. So
Oh, that's a good
I'll
one.
repeat that again.
Yes.
It's not timing the market, meaning trying to get it at the right
best price.
get in at the best price, right time, best interest rate.
Yeah.
It's time in the market that over time will grow more wealth. And that goes for real estate, or that goes for money in a
Investments,
banking account, money in investment accounts. Absolutely. The sooner you get it working for you, like my favorite saying, as you know, is keep your money moving.
Yeah.
And that was something that my dad drilled into my head from when I was a little kid, and he grew up very, very poor. He had very, very humble beginnings.
Yeah.
What he had was he was taught an incredible work ethic, and he found those mentors that kind of taught him about money. And I benefited from that because I got to
You really
watch
did.
it.
Yeah.
And he helped me with it. And that's the thing he always said to me is keep your money moving. Make your
Yeah.
money work harder for you than you did for it. Because it is the eighth wonder of the world. Compound interest, simple compound interest. Even if some people feel really intimidated when they start thinking about,
stock
putting their
market.
money in the
Yeah.
market.
Yeah.
It really isn't complicated. And I always try to break that down for people to where it isn't intimidating, because it really isn't. But just to start with, you can literally just take your paycheck
Yeah.
and you should divide it up into 3 accounts. One should go into just a plain old bill paying account. That's your checking
your
account.
pass-through.
Figure out how much money you need to pay your bills. If it's, let's say it's $2,000 a month. I'm literally just using numbers. $2,000 a month. Have that go straight from your paycheck right into your bill paying account. Then you have your high yield savings account. So it should be 10% of that paycheck goes directly into a high yield savings account. That becomes your emergency fund. That is your fund that will ultimately grow into long-term savings, but it really is that emergency account.
Yeah.
And then 401k. If you work for a company that offers a 401k and you
free
are
money.
not investing, you are absolutely cheating yourself. And then on top of it, if that company at all contributes anything, like for example, you put $1,000 into that 401k and they're willing to match it, like a lot of companies will match it at 25, 30% up to a certain amount.
Right.
That means they're going to put another $300. It's
free money.
It's free money.
As an
that
employee
grows
benefit of the
over time,
employer.
and it's pre-tax.
Yeah.
So that's always my advice. And a lot of the interesting thing is some clients will say, well, but I literally feel like everything I make, I need it all to go to bills. No, you don't.
Right.
Actually, you don't, because here's what you'll learn over time. You'll learn that when you pay yourself first, which is the whole concept of putting it into the 10% into the high yield savings account, you will learn to adjust
Totally.
expenses, and you'll realize those little things that you spend money on that you're not aware of that you really don't need to spend money
Right.
on.
Like the afternoon coffee I used to get when I bought my first house.
Yes.
I got my morning coffee and I did this whole budget when I was buying my first house.
Yes.
And I was like, why is my math so off? Because I completely and entirely forgot the little cute Starbucks afternoon visit I did every day, right?
Yes.
I didn't need it.
Yes. Do you know, not like for people out there that go to Starbucks every day and spend $5 for a coffee, can you even buy a coffee for $5 anymore?
I don't know. I make my coffee at home now.
Okay.
Everyone.
Well, I mean, and I'm a huge coffee fan and I love Starbucks. Just to set the record straight, I love Starbucks. I've been a fan. I have friends at Starbucks, love it. But as an example, your favorite cafe, let's say you just cut out that $5 every single day over 30 years.
Oh, yeah. That's what I'm saying.
You would have saved $220,000.
No
just
interest
think
considered.
about that.
No interest
That's
considered.
not considering interest. Yes. It's huge.
Yeah.
People just don't realize that.
Yeah.
And so by making yourself be disciplined to pay yourself first, that was always the concept that I grew up learning is pay yourself first. You owe it to yourself. 10% into your high yield savings account, that becomes your emergency fund, long-term savings. 10% into your 401k. 20% of that gross paycheck should go into those. The rest of it goes into your bill paying account. Anything left over from the bill paying account, swipe it over into the high yield savings. Yeah. It's the best advice I think any young people that are starting out can learn, because you cannot start saving soon enough, because again, time in the market will always outpace and outweigh timing the market in almost every situation.
You know, it's so funny. You were just talking about that, and you were talking about young people because I, of course, brought it up, right? Mm-hmm. Every little dollar counts is the simple lesson. And the sooner we teach our children, the more powerful life can be for them. Mm-hmm. But it's also so powerful for those who are buying their last house. Yes. I see this all the time. So it used to be, we used to have different tax code in the United States, whereby if you took you had to take whatever profit you had earned and it had to go into the new house. And if you did that, you weren't taxed.
Yes.
But guess what? That's not true anymore. Mm-hmm. So if you live in your primary residence as a single owner, and if you live in that home consecutively for 3 out of the most recent 5 years, right? You can get $250,000 of your capital gains tax-free, not a dollar owed.
Actually, I think it's just 2 years. It's as little as just 2 years.
Is it 2 out of the last 5? 2 out of the last 5.
2.
So if you live in your home for 2 consecutive years out of the most recent 5, right? You as a single owner get $250,000 completely tax-free, right?
Yeah, no capital gains.
No capital gains.
Yep.
And then as 2 owners, a married couple, you can get up to $500,000 tax-free. So many of my last time buyers, right? They're selling a home. Maybe it's a 2-story or a 3-story, or there's stairs or there's square footage, and they just want to downsize, right? And they make this money upon sale. And their whole thought process is, I got to take that money and put it to the new place. All of it. Yeah. And some of it is because they want the lowest payment possible. Some of that I understand. However, 0 times 0 is 0. Mm-hmm. And if we put, let's say they're going to net $500,000, and we can split it. We can put $250,000 down and $250,000 in the market. Conservatively, I would say that investor is more at the high yield savings account. Don't go hog wild in the stock market. We don't have time to work for us, right? Yeah. But too often we see buyers think that everything that they net as a seller, they must put into their new home. And I know you and I have talked a lot about this. I think, oh my gosh, you've cracked open that equity. You have such a chance to balance, right? Having a house paid off is not all that sexy when you pass away. Yes. Because you're not even there to enjoy it, right? And if you have, family, we're talking about generational wealth. Really, you are wealthier. Look, there are wealthy people in this country who shall remain nameless, who leverage all their real estate because they want the max loans because they want all their money over here. That's a little severe, but the reality is we invest in the market, we invest in real estate, and the most wealthy people in our country, and I would argue the world, have both growing for them, right? So if we take all of our equity and we collapse it, we take all that money that we were going to get, our proceeds that weren't even taxed capital gains and we put it all into a house. It's doing nothing. It's like mattress money. It's just sitting there.
Yeah.
Right?
Dead equity.
It's dead equity.
Dead
and
equity.
they would be so much wealthier.
Yes.
So, and look, Carese, you're the whiz. But I would say, my father always said, right, and we would have these conversations, that very simply put, in the Seattle area, real estate tends to double every 10 years, right, which is proven to be true. You pay 200, in 10 years it's worth 400, in 10 years it's worth 800, in 10 years it's worth 1.6, which is hard for us to understand, but it's what history has shown us.
Yes.
And the same is true with liquid investments. So, right, if you have a wise plan, you're going to earn 8 to 10%, right? Which means, right, rule of 72, means you're really going to see it double in about 10 years, just for easy math.
Yep.
So
True.
Let's take that $250,000. That $250,000 buys, their last house, and, I don't know. I'm going to make it $1 million because it's easy math. It doesn't have to be that much. But $1 million, and in 10 years is $2 million, and 10 years is $3 million. That's just statistically what has happened. That 250 over here in 10 years was $500,000. And another 10 years is $1 million, and another 10 years is $2 million, right?
Yes.
You are wealthier for the blended approach than to have taken all of it and collapsed it into real estate. And some people will say, yeah, but what about the interest that you pay on that loan? It doesn't make up for it. It does not mathematically make up for the compound interest lost over here. So I would say to our last buyers too, it's so important to not take every dollar that you earn and collapse it into the real estate, or you don't have both main avenues of wealth building working for you.
I couldn't agree more. That's one of we've actually hit on 2 of the 3, in my opinion, top misconceptions that we run into every day. Yeah. Number 1, pulling my credit is going to cause the credit score to go down. Right. I would say, I'd probably say that has got to be the number 1 misconception.
Agreed.
In mortgages.
Or really
buyers think that inquiries that us pulling their credit is going to adversely affect the score. Right. It's such a tiny
sliver. Yeah.
And people get with the bureaus 30 to 45 days, you can have unlimited inquiries in a certain category.
Mortgage,
Without it counts as 1 inquiry. Number 2, they think you got to put 20% down. So many people still think you have to put 20% down. That's the second biggest conception. And the third one that you just hit on, that people are not aware of this awesome tax code that allows people, a single $250,000, married $500,000, can take money of that much out of the proceeds from a sale, capital gains free, and that's after expenses. So like your real estate agent fees, your Washington State excise tax, any seller closing costs, any permanent improvements to the home.
Right. Anything they've put in doesn't get taxed back out. Yeah.
And of course, people should always check with their CPA because there's always specifics that apply to each individual. But those are definitely the highlights. That all can be deducted before you hit the 250 or 500.
Right.
So that comes off prior to even getting to the capital gains. So you might really have capital gains of 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Or 9 or $1 million, depending on what kind of a permanent remodel or rehab or permanent improvements you did into the home. But people have that misconception that you have to take all of the proceeds and put it into the next property. And you don't. And in most cases, you really shouldn't.
Agreed.
There's always going to be some unique scenarios. If somebody has a financial advisor that has advised them that way, obviously that's what they should do because their advisor knows their full picture. However, in most cases, I agree with you. I would say, why don't you take part of it for the down payment? Go take your money and invest it. Make some money off of it because it's going to be dead equity. Yeah. Just sitting in this house.
And it's so funny. People who tend to have a conservative approach with money are the same people who think, I have to take all my proceeds and immediately put it to the next house. Fundamentally, that's the least conservative thing you could have done. Ever, because now you took all your money and locked it into a house. But what do we have to do if we want to get our money back out of a house? We have to turn around and sell it, or we have to now pay an interest rate on money that was ours, free and clear. We now have to borrow. We have to do a home equity line of credit, or we have to do a cash out refinance. And now we're paying the bank, right? an interest rate when it was our money free and clear, right? So fundamentally, if we take all of our equity and we immediately put it into our next home, I would say that's the least conservative. The most conservative would be take a reasonable amount and put it towards the home. Don't have an uncomfortable new mortgage payment. Be smart. I'm not saying that. Do not overstretch, right? Know yourself, know your budget, know your spending. But anything in excess of that comfort, I would invest over here, because what happens if you hit a financial, difficulty? You've got it right there, and you're taking it from yourself. You're not borrowing it from the bank when you did have it free and clear. And while it was sitting there unused and untapped, it's been gaining compound interest.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Moderation's always the key. I feel like there's solutions that moderation's always good. I mean, no debt is a bad thing, just like too much debt is a bad thing. But a little bit of debt is good. You want to have a little bit of debt. Like if you're paying cash for everything, I don't think that's a good strategy. I
agree.
You want to have some debt. So it's like a lot of stuff in life. Moderation's the key.
Totally.
So yeah, I would say in this market, it depends, because across the country, it's going to be very, very different. It's math. It's always going to be math that's going to drive appreciation. And that's because there's limited land to put a property, whether it's a manufactured home, whether it's a condominium, whether it's a single family home or a townhome. Single family homes, in my experience, have always had the highest appreciation level because they're the most sought after.
Yeah.
And they hold the most value typically. That isn't always the case. A penthouse in New York, because that area tends to be more condo versus single family homes. Markets like that, it's going to be a little bit different. But overall, single family homes are going to give you the most appreciation.
Right.
Followed by townhomes, because they're the most sought after. That tends to be what people gravitate to. If they can't afford a single family home, they're going to go to a townhome. So townhome by definition those can either be condo townhome or they can be single family townhome. And that's just based on how it's set up by the homeowner association. If it's a single family townhome, you own the land underneath. It's financed like a single family home. If it's a condo townhome, it means you have air rights and it's financed like a condo. And there's a homeowner association that handles the maintenance, they handle the insurance and so forth. Then it goes to condos. Condos would be the third with appreciation, just because they're typically not as, I mean, for some buyers, they're super sought after. But that tends to be, in my experience, I mean, you tell me if that's different from what you understand, but that's always kind of been in my experience how it goes. Single family, townhome, and then condo. As far as manufactured homes go, that one is a little bit of an outlier based on the market we're in. Here in this market, I mean, those are appreciating. I mean, manufactured homes appreciate, I would say, on the level of like a townhome. Depending on the area.
Well, it's funny. I would say the simple answer to the question of what should I look at buying, or where can I expect to see the most statistically advantageous rate of return in a hot market like Seattle. You can't answer this as a blanket answer for the country, but in Seattle, one of the things that we somewhat hear agents say almost ad nauseum is location, location, location. What are the three most important things in real estate? Location, 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 right? It's like when I was about to give birth to our youngest child, and I said to my husband, hey, we got to go to the hospital with 3 names. What are your 3 names? He said, well, mine are Harper, Harper, and Harper. Thank you very much, honey. So location, 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 right? And then you have to look at who owns the dirt, right? So who owns the dirt? Because really that location conversation is because of the dirt. If you own the dirt, and let me just say to your listeners, the land, if you own the land, it is the land itself that is appreciating very powerfully. Even if you have a gorgeous castle next to, a mid-century modern home on the same street, it is the land that is solidly appreciating, right? So certainly a single family home has the most land traditionally, and to your point, has the most demand. Townhomes are next because we get to own that land by virtue of definition. A townhome, you own the sliver of land underneath you. It's a smaller sliver. You've got more communal living, perhaps more close quarters, but you do own the sliver of land underneath you, which is why statistically we see that happen. Condos, we don't own the land underneath it. We own like a share of the building, right? Or the air rights, really. Co-op, we own a share of the building. Manufactured homes, very simple answer. If you own that land underneath a manufactured home, the dirt is going to be super solid for you, right? Buying a manufactured home in a mobile home park, you're paying somebody else's mortgage. You are renting the land, and I would never do it. I would never do it if I had any of these other vehicles available, right? I would buy a manufactured home on land in a great location all day long. If that was the access to me, right? And the prices on those are more reasonable right now. I'm seeing it in my own business because not everyone's going to choose or elect to buy a manufactured home. But if it's permanently affixed to the foundation and it's permanently on that land, because again, is the dirt that is really solidly appreciating, I would say go for it.
I had a client, longtime client of mine, early this year, buy a gorgeous double wide manufactured home in Vashon Island on property. It was stunning, and it had multiple offers on it. They can garner multiple offers just like a single family. To your point, the location and the land that's around them is what's really going to drive it. But the land, definitely.
Which is interesting. You know, you can test me out on this theory or test you out on this theory. If you go to any county, you go to King County Parcel Viewer, you just type it into your search engine, you go to King County Parcel Viewer, and you're going to look up this property that you're looking at, right?
Yes.
And you look it up. And you get to it, and you're going to see that King County has this property, you know, evaluated or appraised at $500,000, and you're like, why am I paying $800,000? King County says it's worth $500,000. Well, that's because King County gives or most counties give the entire weight of that value mostly to the land. And then they call it the improvements. The improvements, otherwise known as the sticks and bricks, otherwise known as the house, is something that often they slowly depreciate over time. Why? Because it's getting older. Right? The sticks and bricks are aging, right? Now, if there's a new renovation, then obviously the improvement value goes way up again. But in answering two questions, one, you can see how much the land is important by doing some sort of fun tax parcel search. I might be a nerd. But two, it answers the question to so many consumers of why is my King County or county appraised value so much different than my market value? Because what a buyer will pay for that land and home is what the market value is. What the county decides to give valuation to is the dirt
for taxes.
So the larger the lot, the larger the land piece, right? And then the home, they have different grades. Is it above average, average? Is it luxury, right? But the improvement is still a small piece of it, right? It really is the land. And that tax assessed value or appraised value is never in a hot market like any of our coastal cities, never ever going to reach what the market would pay for that. Right?
Agreed. Yes, I would agree. And a lot of people don't realize like that is public record. They can absolutely just go Google, like in this case, King County tax assessor. And you can literally go put in the address
or someone's address.
And it will give all that information. And it's, I mean, I nerd out to it too. So
all the time.
It's all good. It has been fantastic talking with you today.
Thank you for having me.
So much.
I feel like we probably could have talked forever.
Yes. We covered some great things today though. Thank you very, very much. And as always, for any additional questions, just please reach out and send me a message and subscribe and like.